Calvary.
Here.
Davis Folsom.
Here.
Dumont.
Here.
Tashi. Here. Hussey. Here. Finley.
Here.
Knowles.
Here.
Lambert. Here. White.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Woods. Here. Before the pledge of allegiance, welcome. We have a new school board member, Billy Joe. Before we start, everyone to go around and introduce everyone and what town they're from. So, Gray, you want to start?
Trina Dumont, Albion.
Rachel Hatchie, Fairfield.
Jerry Knowles, Clinton.
Danielle Williams, Fairfield.
Stu Kinley, Fairfield.
Sarah Williams, Benton. Hannah Lizzie, Fairfield.
Who I like that.
Beth Lambert, Fairfield. Jenny Boyden, Clinton.
So we'll do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. New business, COVID impact. Vernon, you ready?
Yeah. It's an ever-changing situation, and I apologize for what seems last-minute communications, but as you saw today, we had a report of our third case in the school, so that makes 2 students and 1 staff member who have been identified as COVID positive. When we were down looking at the floor by the restroom area, I don't know if you noticed Sean Boynton there, but Sean Boynton, the junior high principal, and the assistant principal, Laura Reynolds, are still working through this next number of contacts, close contacts, identifying, in this case, it's 49 students who have been subsequently identified as close contacts. So that's a total of 147, and I have not updated that in the letter because we're just working through this. It's 147 students, that's roughly 50% of the student population here at the junior high school who have been identified as close contacts and need to quarantine. And with this third case, that brings the staff involvement up to 20. And one of the reasons for trying to work through this is our definitely our concern for the volume of students who have been in contact with a positive person, but also our ability to staff the building while in-person learning is going on. And likely we could not do that with being short 20 adults, and people could be working from home and teaching remotely to these students, but we still need someone when we have students physically present to supervise and manage them and make sure that they're okay and on track. So the volume is concerning, and I don't know health-wise if any of these individuals are reporting symptoms, but it will be important, and I will push out this communication that we continue when we're able to open here, but district-wide, that we adhere to the safety protocols laid out, the health and safety protocols laid out, and that would involve distancing, mask wearing, and sanitizing, disinfecting. Again and again and again. For example, convening a meeting in this space right now. I've had questions relating to, is it safe to be in here? And certainly Tuesday, Ray Wakeham, our custodian assigned to this building, was gowned up with all his equipment on, and he began this process of disinfecting this space, which included fogging and misting, and those chemicals and that process required when we have a report of a positive case. But every day, the place is sanitized and disinfected with the work of Advance One. But, you know, there lies the concern, and I can tell you, I can assure you that the place is free of that germ prior to everyone arriving here, of course. So that's important. The other piece is I have had multiple conversations with the Maine Department of Education school nurse consultant, Emily Poland, and I have also been in communication with a couple of individuals at the Maine CDC, but most recently, just before the meeting, I spoke with an epidemiologist out of the Maine CDC, because when a school community, a school, reaches that threshold of 3 positive cases, there's concern about community spread. But with the information that they have gathered, we are taking the appropriate measures with just the closure through November 30th. They do leave the case open, and it will be Lawrence Junior High case for 28 days, so it's some days after the quarantine period is over, as we look to see if there are other developments. And of course, the close contact and contact tracing is pretty intensive work. We begin with pulling rosters, looking at teacher schedules, looking at all the other associated staff, for example, educational technicians who might come into that space and work individually with students. The cafeteria is another space where we have children distance. If you go down there and look, you'll see that there are actually desks there. Kids are physically separated that way, but the masks come off when they eat. So anyone in a space with a person who has tested positive is considered a close contact. In fact, there is a duration, whether it's 15 consecutive minutes or 15 minutes over the course of 24 hours. So part of the work has been to track, through surveillance and just people's schedules, where people go during the day and how long they stay in that space. And we can be masked up. We can be 6 feet apart in the classroom, but if a COVID positive person is in there, it's been determined that they are positive. All people in that space are identified as a close contact. So you can see how this rapidly multiplies, compounds over time, and equated to, the first domino has been tapped. And I'm hoping with this closure, because we're going to move through a period where there's no more contact among the people when they're at school. And these cases haven't been deemed associated with the school, but we have that circumstance here right now. So that makes 4 positive for our school district. In the elementary settings, and particularly where the first one was at Clinton Elementary School, thanks to the guidelines laid out by the DOE and what we adopted for a hybrid, it affected one cohort of one section of a grade. So that involved a positive student in the room, the 5 other students and a teacher who was in that space. And that didn't produce any other positive cases. Unfortunately, in that circumstance, the children stay put. In the secondary, the 7-12 setting, you all know that students move around. So our first case, being an adult, the students came to the teacher, and it affected more students, but fewer staff, and we had the inverse with students moving around. Both cohorts at a grade level were affected because of the staff member contact. Not the staff member's fault, but there were 2 days where children were in contact with the staff member. So That resulted in 56 students that first day, but just 3 staff. And then we started with like I said, the inverse of that. Fortunately, transportation wasn't involved in either case. I mean, we just run through, you know, all the scenarios, the what ifs, and see how wide the web is. There are, as I posted up this afternoon, there are some common programs, but typically there is nothing that would require junior high and senior high students, or particularly they're not allowed to cross paths. They're very well segregated. We've worked on that a number of years ago, and Principal Dan Bowers had rerouted at the opening of school, and that was part of educating the students where their pathways were, because we have, say, the annex, for example, where the kids need to leave the high school building proper and get up to math classes and some other programs out in the annex. So he was clear on what those pathways are. They do share 2 common staff members, teachers with the band and chorus program. In the junior high, that is a co-curricular. It's not built into the regular program. Children opt for that. Neither of these individual students participated in that, but that might have had a possibility of affecting 2 high school staff, nor do either of these students have music this quarter. And though they wouldn't be in a space with high schoolers at the same time, they'd be in a space where high schoolers occupy at some other point in the day, and they'd also be working with some staff that also work with high school students. So we've avoided that context right now. You know, had there been a student who was positive and took the bus to school, you know, we would have had a whole other number of involvements. So right now, this is where we're at because of these students' particular schedules in part. One of the things that I was speaking about earlier that was changed at the beginning of this year in the opening was the junior high cafeteria was used as a one lunch mod for the senior high. They weren't there with the high schoolers, but they used that cafeteria, and we stopped that this year, added lunch mods in other places. So there's not a space where the students cross paths, nor do we share staff. We do have some services, OT, PT, that are staff members that really work throughout the district. But again, those services were not involved in these particular cases. The other concern, I guess, is that just the perception that and I've seen it mentioned, that the buildings aren't physically connected, but there is really not passage. The bell schedules are different, and that is something that we've, you know, also worked on years ago, but that we don't have junior high age children out in the hallway at the same time as high school age children are. And that was the case years ago. This junior high school, when I was hired many years ago, housed it was called foreign language then, world language now. And high school students would travel to the end of that hallway and take their French or Spanish classes and walk right along, you know, junior high students. And that's not the case anymore. So we really have separated out the building. The one space where high schoolers travel at a different time of day than junior high kids would be out in the hallway is that very last stairwell. And that is their way, one of 2, to access the world language wing on the 2nd floor, where the multipurpose room is. And also Renee Meisner is working out of that space with her chorus students so she can, you know, separate them out far enough to have some sort of program. So those are the only 2 common areas. So we'll be closed. Actually, of the 3 cases, the furthest point out would be after the quarantine period. So the exposure days, ground zero, and the subsequent days, day 1, so 14, and that would put return on Thanksgiving Day. So the 30th is just, the first day school's back in session. So that is the update for you and our community and families. I believe, and I've heard very directly from a person in this room that they wanted to report that their child had a good, full remote day, and it was a good experience and it went well. And credit to the teachers who were able to just, transition to that environment. We've been talking about it for a while, but when it actually occurs, and again, in this case, I'm going to talk about this a little further. This is a situation in which we have a local infection that is quite significant, and that we need to be sure that it doesn't perpetuate in this environment, and we don't become the spreaders of the illness here and affect more people. And the interesting part that we found is that actually in all three of these instances, it's not the CDC that has contacted the school district. Parents have reported a positive test, and staff member had. And we reach out, and there's a protocol that we go through with a nurse consultant. And there is a protocol that we go through with the CDC. And as I said, the trigger for today's call to me by an epidemiologist, an investigator, is that threshold of 3. But it's lagging time. For example, and we're very fortunate that yesterday was a holiday, because as I came in and was preparing and starting to draft really a return to school today, based on what we knew, we got another case. And the previous day, when we were closing because a staff member was positive, and I didn't have a date of return because we hadn't been able to do the contact tracing. That takes time, and you have to be sure that you've thoroughly looked at it, so you don't have people coming in who might be contact that you discover after they spent the day here. And the CDC, in my conversations with them, you're probably reading in the paper that superintendents are identifying a positive and a probable. Well, probable is a CDC term. It's a CDC designation, and I was not permitted to use that. I was just directed to, tell the community that the school is closed, or it was suggested that, and it is a local decision, that it's closed until we gather further information. But as I was writing to express that evening, Monday evening, I received a call from the CDC that had changed that status, skipped the probable, and went right to the positive adult. So I guess to understand that there's a lag, the CDC is overrun. And so is the DOE. That Emily Poland, picks up that phone, and I can catch her and speak with her directly. I'm grateful, because many superintendents and school nurses are in contact, and as you can see, the multiplier effect here, just in today's Sentinel, it's really exploding. So we're trying to keep up on it. I am going to send out a communication to encourage people, if you become aware of a positive case that affects you or your family, or as an employee, as a parent, please let us know, because there's a lag in time when we would hear from the CDC. And if you are not feeling well at all, to please, stay home, stay out of the school, because you can see how quickly this affected, almost 150 students and 20 adults. So that's what our situation here is right now, and I hope that we don't develop more, but it does happen very quickly. Are there any questions of me about what we've done so far to address this? Thank you. The other issue in regard to the closure, and this is why I've asked Scott to be here this evening and for the board to consider, is the need to replace that sewer line that is failing in the junior high on the first floor, and the involvement of excavating out concrete flooring and the dirt and pulling that out of the building, cutting out the pipe, replacing it, and then putting it all back together, putting in new concrete and new flooring. And at the very minimum, that's going to take 2 weeks, and we really need to do that sooner than later for the school building to operate. And especially in these times, sometimes, if we weren't in this environment, we could look at other options and where we can put people and maybe use smaller spaces and have more people in, but we just can't do that right now. It is the opposite of that. So if, Scott, you could just, again, recap what you did. Scott's worked very hard on so many things, but the first thing you did is brought in an engineer. The building is deemed safe. It's structurally sound, so that's important to know. But the system needs to be replaced.
Yeah, so I did get in touch with the engineer once this problem occurred, and, to make sure that when he looked at the floor, that it was safe for everyone to be in here. That was, top priority. But we do have something going on underneath there, like I said earlier, so we're gonna have to cut 70 to 80 feet of hallway, dig dirt up, replace that pipe, and hopefully that's all that's going on underneath there. I have my doubts, but hopefully that's it. But that will be the time, once we dig that all out, to see what's going on and take care of anything else that we find. So hopefully I can, contractors will say, yes, I can get right on it when I meet with them tomorrow. They're saying a minimum of 2 weeks, so, and that's going to be, dependent on what we find once we dig that out, so.
So the question would be how soon you could line up all the contractors to do the work, and that might be something that you could determine tomorrow.
Hopefully tomorrow I'll have an answer on time.
Okay. So the question of the board, and maybe you wait till you have more information, but we're closed here in the building through the 30th to all people. And no one will be able to be here when this work begins. Do we wish to reopen on the 30th and then maybe close a week before the Christmas break and maybe have to extend it a week after? Or do we just try to do it as soon as possible and just prolong the closure until the work is done?
It's that we do it as soon as possible, prolong, because if we pull everybody back and we have more problems with that school, we're shutting the school back down there. So I mean, if the school is going to be empty, and then the other thing we have the problem is, if we push it till the end of the year, we may be running into problems getting concrete.
I would suggest that we go open the building again.
Okay.
I would agree with Roy and Neil. I think it would be the ideal situation if they could be here on Monday and get it all fixed in 2 weeks, and we could come back on the 30th. But if they can't, then my opinion would also be that we should, understanding their timeline. If they tell us that they can't come in until the beginning of February, then we may need to reevaluate that. But if they're saying it'll be the first week of December, then I would agree we should do it immediately and just delay the kids going back into the building.
I say the same thing, but I also speak on the students. I think it's easier to leave them home. They're going to get used to this routine. They're already getting pretty good at it. I can speak for my own. if that's possible, I mean, they may think we're crazy, but if that's possible.
In some cases where it's an emergency, you might be able to get the contractors quicker, you know, especially in the public school building. You know, sometimes people take priority on jobs.
I agree. I say we just prolong the closure. I think it would be too crazy for the staff and for the students to be in and out, in and out. And as long as the contractors can do it within a timely fashion.
I agree.
I agree. Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you.
So, moving on to other business, could I get a motion to go into executive session pursuant to one MRSA section 4056A to discuss contract negotiations?
So moved.
Has been moved by Roy and seconded by Ray to go into executive session. At 7:36.
It's going to take 1 minute for
Any discussion? All those in favor? They're not taking a minute. We're gonna vote, guys, it's totally safe. Okay, 13? 0. So after the executive session, we talked about what was asked by the Teachers Association and the board on Tuesday. So I'm first gonna go with the teacher in-service days that were asked so that teachers could have extra prep time without an agenda put forward for that day. So we are looking at December 14th for an in-service day. And there's already one built into the calendar for January 15th. So we would leave that one as is. Is there any discussion from the board on that? On that specific date? You could go ahead.
So I just want to clarify, if we do move ahead with the December 14th in-service day, is that going to affect the calendar as far as blue days and gray days?
No, it will stay the same. It'll go
Okay.
gray. I have the calendar in front of me. So it would be taking a blue day away. So that Tuesday would be gray. And that Wednesday would be blue and so on. So are we on consensus to do the 14th as another in-service day? So we need a motion, correct?
Is that a recommendation of the superintendent?
Is it?
yes.
Yes.
As I was just speaking with Ray, the December 14th date is in part of our work because the high school is tied to the Mid-Maine Technical Center, and there was a governance board meeting on Monday, and at least one of the area superintendents has put that date forth to the school board as an added in-service day. So we need to just be careful that we're coordinating that with the tech center.
Okay.
So I made a motion
Thank you.
to add December 14th as a in-service day that would be available to teachers with no agenda but for their catch-up purposes, and keep January 15th as an in-service day for the same purposes.
Second.
hears what teachers are saying and asking for. Some of the conversations that have been, that Sue and I have been a part of, we feel would be better suited for the teachers to get answers and be set forth locally within their own schools, through their administration, through the superintendent, to work together to try to solve these issues. I don't think that I'm going to say most of us on the board, I don't feel is qualified to be making some of these decisions. But I have my notes. I'm going to pass them along so that everything can be worked out. I think what the TA was asking isn't unattainable. I think that's something that could happen. But we also don't want to feel, I don't think the board wants it out there like we're pushing it off, that's not our problem. It is, because ultimately we govern the district. And I think for all of us, we actually really do care. So anyway, I think we'll just move forward and try to work with each other and try to get out there and get everything written out so that your expectations are very clear. And the teachers and the administration can have each other's back on that. Does anyone else have anything else to say?
Yeah, that doesn't mean the board doesn't have an interest in the outcome.
Correct.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, that we hear that the teachers who come into the board are coming because there's a breakdown in communication and they're not being heard. And so that we are committed as a board to helping figure that out. And we think the way that that happens is not through policy, contract negotiations with us, but through opening up those lines and building back up that trust, and we're confident that our work here and